Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
Beads, parades, trumpets, voodoo, gumbo. New Orleans has it all. The city known for its extravagant nightlife and rich culture steeped in history and crime? Just like every other major city, New Orleans is no stranger to crime. Look at those prisoners that just escaped, right? Although regular crime runs rampant through the alleys of the Big Easy, many would not suspect that white-collar crime is also part of the city's history. Today, we look at former mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin, and how his reign wiped out the hopes and dreams of a struggling city. Learn more about it on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
Voodoo, gumbo, that one series of unsolved axe murders that happened in the city I don't remember when it happened, but it happened.
Have you ever been to New Orleans?
Nope.
Oh, I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I like whiskey.
Yeah.
They're known for drinks.
Oh, yeah, they are. Bourbon Street. They have a whole street named after it.
Hey, count me in. You're going to name a street after one of my favorite things?
Bourbon Street smells crazy.
What's next? KFC Macaroni and Cheese Street? All right.
The Double Downs?
God, that has to be the whitest thing I've said in a while.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I loved KFC Mac and Cheese so much. I wish they named a street out of it. Oh, scrub my existence from the internet. I'm done.
We've all been hoping for that. And welcome back to another episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
I'm Kashan.
And I'm Nina. And today we are going to be talking about Ray Nagin, the former mayor of New Orleans. But we have some other business to attend to. Last week, I don't know if you heard the news. We have an update. We have an update on an episode that we recorded actually just a few weeks ago.
It was 2 weeks ago.
Literally 2 weeks ago. We have an update on Todd and Julie Chrisley. Okay. Todd and Julie Chrisley, if you don't remember, went to jail for fraud. They were supposed to be in jail for like 12 years and Donald Trump just pardoned them. Not sure when they're going to be released, but they're very excited about it. Their fan base is excited about it. You know, what's crazy is that they didn't donate any money to the Trump campaign. So I think he just did this out of the goodness and kindness of his heart.
He's just like, now that's a good Christian family.
He's like, Todd Chrisley, that's a good Christian
family. The kind
man
that evades taxes.
Yep.
Just like Jesus Christ would have wanted.
I believe in Jesus and I don't pay taxes. That's a throwback to our very first season, if you've been here since the beginning.
And also said bumper stickers across the entirety of the Deep South, I'm sure.
It's something along those lines. Something along those lines. We're talking about New Orleans, Louisiana. So here on White Collars, Red Hands, we have talked about crooked mayors before. We did an episode on Detroit's former mayor, Kwame Kilpatrick. And today we're looking at the former mayor of the Big Easy, New Orleans.
Is that an actual nickname for New Orleans?
Yeah, the Big Easy.
Never heard it.
Well, you've never been there.
Fair enough.
So Clarence Ray Nagin, he was a businessman who was raised in New Orleans. He had pretty humble beginnings. It seems from what I could see, he wasn't dirt poor, but he also, didn't live lavishly. He had a working class family. He was really passionate about education. And he wanted better for himself. He wanted to be richer than his parents. And that did happen for a period of time. He was well educated. He actually attended Tuskegee University. And then after graduation, he bounced around. He went to LA for a while, was in Detroit for a little while. But then he ended up coming home and he became the VP and general manager at Cox Communications in New Orleans, which was a cable company, where he made $400,000 per year.
When was this around?
at this point,
Yeah.
this was like the 90s.
Okay.
Late 90s.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying 400. It's crazy that we're at a point where like $400,000 for a VP, you're like, eh.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, but in the 90s, that's great.
Yeah, I'm not exactly 100% sure the exact date that he worked there, but he became, well, we're about to say it, but he became mayor in 2002. So this was prior to 2002. So Nagin really seemed to be living the dream. I mean, he had a beautiful home, a family, a great career, but he wanted something more. In 2002, he decided to throw his hat in as a mayoral candidate for New Orleans. And he ran on a platform of anti-corruption and a business and being business minded. Okay.
Those two things seem to conflict with each other, but I'll keep my opinion to myself.
Yeah, a little bit. He really did, say he wanted better for New Orleans. A lot of people believed him. I think it helped that he grew up there. And
well, I don't think he would have ran a good campaign if he was running on not better for New Orleans.
Well, that's true.
Never seen someone successfully be like, I'm running for mayor and I want to make this place a shithole.
Well, yeah. The only time I've seen a candidate win who didn't promise things to be better, it was fictional. So it was in Yellowstone when John Dutton.
No. We're not doing a Yellowstone reference. Button that one back up. We're skipping right past it. My God.
He did. He ran on a platform. He was like, progress stops here.
I like how I said we're not doing it, and then you were like, I'm gonna keep doing it.
I don't respect your boundaries.
Oh my God.
So Nagin ended up dominating in the elections, and he won. And he came in, he was really sincere, and he had a lot of promise. And as a New Orleans native, he really wanted to see the city thrive, and he sought to make it a better place. And it appeared as though he did, because in the first 11 weeks that he was mayor, he put an operation together to clean up the bribery in the city, specifically with the city's taxi cab licensing and inspection programs. There was like a lot of bribery going on, a lot of shady stuff going on within the taxi cab licensing and stuff. So he was like, I'm going to take this down. And he did. He made 84 arrests in one day. Well, not he himself, but the cops made 84 arrests in one day.
So much cooler if he was out there slapping the handcuffs on 84 different people.
I want a mayor who arrests his citizens.
Yeah, that's grassroots.
Yeah.
Come on. Give them what the people want.
Like when Lori Lightfoot was out on the lake telling people to go back home during COVID. She was like, you can't be out here. Go back home.
She's a very unintimidating person, so.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of her.
Very small.
Although he had made all those arrests, and another note of one of those 84 arrests, one of the people was his cousin. So he wanted to prove a point, like no one was above the law.
I'm not playing favorites. I'll even arrest my least favorite cousin.
However, although he made that big show and all those arrests, no one was convicted. And even though there was no payoff of this operation, Nagin's approval rating ended up shooting up to 80%. So in perspective, if we're putting this in perspective, if you're a first-time listener, Kashawn and I live in the city of Chicago, okay? Our mayor is Brandon Johnson. And I was curious to see what his approval rating was. And as of February of 2025, it sits at 14%, which is really, really bad. That's really bad.
Couldn't name one thing he's done. I know nothing.
I didn't really think we hated him quite that much, but yeah.
We hate all our mayors, though, to be fair.
That's true. I don't think we've...
The last one we liked was Crazy, so... Daly.
That's what I was thinking.
Like they
but I wasn't
Daly.
Here for that.
And he was in for a long time, but he was insane. So, yeah.
That's Chicago. Nagin was passionate about bringing reform to the city and the government. And at first, he was pretty successful in doing this. And the people were starting to really trust their government, hence the 80% approval rate. One way that Nagin brought an update to the city was that he was passionate about bringing new technology to City Hall. He was quoted saying something along the lines of, I'm used to George Jetson, and this place is the Flintstones. Because he was working at this cable company had a pretty good technology. He came to City Hall. He realized that everything was really outdated, that everything needed updated. And he was like, no. We cannot run our city this way.
He's like, whoa, everyone's using a DOS machine. This is insane.
Yeah. I don't even know what that is.
For the people who know, they'll know.
What's a DOS?
Don't worry, Nina. I honestly, it's all you need to know is it's one of the earliest forms of Windows. You didn't use a mouse.
Oh,
right.
What'd you use?
Just a keyboard. You navigated everything with a keyboard.
Oh, no.
You had to type in stuff to make anything happen.
Oh, no, thanks.
Yeah.
So because he was so passionate about technology and being up to date with technology, this brought him to form the first mayor's department of technology. And he chose a local tech entrepreneur named Greg Meffert as the chief technology officer. So when I was first learning about this, I felt conflicted. I was like, well, I do think that having someone in tech as the chief technology officer.
It's also a conflict of interest, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll see why.
You're like, the person that controls most of the stuff that he would have to be buying. Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, probably not. And this was like, and as Deshaun said, probably not a good idea. And it was an incredible amount of power to be handing over to someone. And some would say that it was probably the worst decision that Nagin made in his time as mayor. And although Nagin was successful at first, some started to begin to question his ability to lead the city. Nagin's inexperience in government was showing, and it became apparent that he didn't know how to lead, run a city, and build relationships. So right away, he came in hot, but the longer he was mayor, the more it showed that this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But 3 years into his time in office, the unimaginable happened. On August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the city of New Orleans. The Category 5 hurricane left a path of devastation. Now, I will say, it was not a Category 5 when it hit New Orleans. I was seeing some differing answers. It was between a 2 and a 3, which is crazy. Well, actually, do you know what do you know the hurricane ratings? 5 is like worse than 2, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
the higher the number, the worse.
That's what I was thinking. But even as a Category 2, the winds were like 125 miles an hour. It was very, very dangerous and really insane. But there was a point when it was still in the ocean that it was a Category 5. Now, before the hurricane hit the city, Mayor Nagin urged the citizens of New Orleans to evacuate the city, and those who could not, he urged them to seek shelter in the city's designated shelter points. However, this was the first time that I can't remember if it was the whole state of New Orleans did this or just the city, but they had a mandatory evacuation. Normally, they just have a suggested evacuation, but they were like, no, you have got to leave.
It's one of the worst storms in recent history, so would make sense. For good reason. Yeah. Everybody should have evacuated. Over 1 million citizens left New Orleans. However, not everyone was able to evacuate. So New Orleans was subjected to winds of over 100 miles per hour and heavy rainfall. The city of New Orleans, actually, if you don't know this, parts of the city sit below sea level. And at the highest point, the city is only 20 feet above sea level. So it's a very low city. And that doesn't sound like the correct term, but it's not. Oh, I think Garth Brooks has friends there, actually.
Oh, yeah. He has friends in low places. Yeah. New Orleans does have a lot of levees to keep the water back. However, the levees could not handle the storm. They just couldn't. And it was so powerful that it breached the levees. And by August 31st, 2005, 80% of the city was flooded.
Oh my God, Don McLean lied to us. He drove his Chevy all the way out there and he's going to lie to us?
The levee was not dry.
That's crazy.
It was not dry. No. The hurricane quickly caused a health emergency. Those who were seeking shelter in the Superdome, which, if you're unfamiliar, New Orleans has a huge stadium that is called the Superdome. the Saints play there.
Yeah. So it's used to disasters.
Yeah, there are people seeking shelter in the Superdome, and there were people seeking shelter in a convention center, which combined, those were housing about 50,000 people. They had limited access to fresh water, food was becoming scarce, and temperatures were quickly climbing past 90 degrees. If you've ever been to New Orleans, you know that it is incredibly hot and muggy. I've only been to the city in April and November, and it was hot in those months. So I cannot even imagine how hot it was in August, especially with a tropical storm.
Definitely hot enough to kill anyone from the UK on site.
100%. The storm ultimately caused more than $160 billion in damages, and the population of the city fell by 29% between 2005 and 2011. Even to this day, the population has not reached pre-Katrina levels. Now, Hurricane Katrina in total caused about 1,800 deaths, but 341 of those deaths were specifically in Louisiana. Even 20 years later, the city is still feeling the effects of Hurricane Katrina. It is spooky when you go to New Orleans because after they had like pumped all the water out and everything like that, obviously emergency crews had to go through the homes and search for bodies. And they would spray paint a symbol on all the houses that were checked so that people knew that they had checked the houses. And it was like an X. And then they had like dots. If I'm remembering it correctly, it was like an X with dots. And then there would be a number on the, like in the X on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And there were houses that you could like, there was a lot with zeros, but then there were some that like would have a 1 or a 2. And it was definitely like very eerie. Just seeing that. And when I went there for the first time, it was 2014. So it was like almost 10 years later, and the spray paint was still on the houses and you could see it. But there were a lot of people who received a lot of criticism for how Hurricane Katrina was dealt with. George W. Bush received a lot of criticism for how he dealt with the disaster. I think this was when Kanye West went on TV and said
George Bush does not care about black people.
Yeah. That infamous, wonderful quote.
Who knew that would be one of the least craziest things Kanye would do?
Who knew at the time?
You're like, oh, wow, that was crazy. I'm sure he could do anything worse than that.
Cut to 2025, 20 years later. Yeah, George W. Bush was heavily criticized for how it was handled. Ray Nagin was heavily criticized for how it was handled. Some people say that he turned down relief that was being offered. I don't know if that's 100. From what I could find, didn't see that was 100% true. But I really do think that, in my point of view, I'm sure other people would disagree with me. I do think that the government handled Katrina to the best of their ability. We had never experienced a natural disaster like that, so it's pretty hard to plan for something that catastrophic. But after that happened, it was clear that New Orleans needed a strong leader to band together and rebuild after such devastating loss. Rebuilding a city to that level would take years and cost billions of dollars. So that happened in Nagin's third year in office. And after Katrina, Nagin vows to reunite the city and rebuild. However, some believe that Nagin wasn't hands-on enough prior to the disaster, and they felt like he couldn't properly lead afterwards. And like I said, Nagin made a lot of mistakes after Katrina. One of the biggest ones was that he approved a city rebuilding plan that wanted to take several of the flood-prone areas and turn them into green parkways. This doesn't necessarily sound like a horrible idea. However, these were historically African-American neighborhoods that were going to become washed away with the floods, only to be memories. The citizens of New Orleans, when they found out about this plan, they were absolutely outraged by this. And Nagin quickly backtracked on these plans because he was running for re-election. When Nagin ran for the second time, he really tried to heavily appeal to the African American community in New Orleans, and he really wanted their support. Now, I will say, there's a huge black population in New Orleans, and so it makes sense. And Nagin is a black man himself.
That was my next question.
Yeah, he's a black. He's black. So makes sense that he is seeking their vote. And he's a Democrat. I think that, and New Orleans is a pretty liberal city, so it kind of seems like a no-brainer that people would vote for him, even if they weren't necessarily super fond of him the first go around. So he gave a lot of speeches, as one does when they're
politician giving speeches.
Oh, that's crazy. And on Martin Luther King Day, he gave this speech. These are his words, not my words. Okay? I want that prefaced. I didn't write this speech.
Yes, we get it. Okay. It's a speech you gave.
And he said, it's time for us to come together. It's time for us to rebuild a New Orleans, the one that should be a chocolate New Orleans. And I don't care what people are saying uptown or wherever they are, this city will be chocolate at the end of the day.
Is he fucking Willy Wonka? What do you mean? What a weird way to put it.
I know. Why did you say it like that?
All right, everybody, come with me. No.
No. Yeah. Wild that he gave that speech. I don't know who approved it.
That feels like something he said off the cuff. I'm not going to lie.
I did kind of feel like
that. Feels like it wasn't on the teleprompter.
Yeah. But a lot of people were offended by the speech. And I don't, for him to say that, like, this is a city full of rich history. This is a city that, is historically black. Like, we are not going to change that. We are always going to honor our culture, Fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That is a good thing. It's a good thing. But to say it like that, I don't know. I think the wording could have been better. Just saying. Not saying I don't know if I would say it's a chocolate city. But anyways, he is well remembered for that speech. A lot of people really remember that speech when they remember him.
He's remembered. I don't know if he's remembered well, but...
Well, if you're from, remembered, not remembered well. But all this, though, this was a crazy speech. It did empower a lot of the black community to go and vote for him. And it worked. And in May 2006, Nagin won re-election as mayor of the city of New Orleans. So now he has the joy of rebuilding the city that was left in ruin after Katrina. Rebuilding efforts were slow, and people became really frustrated with how long it was taking to rebuild the city. It seemed like Nagin wasn't really trying to get the city back to where it was before Katrina hit. And around this time, a journalist did an investigation, so there were some things that were starting to pop up. They're fishy. And it's got some journalists doing investigations, and one thing that they were finding fishy was Nagin's partial ownership of a granite company called Stone Age.
Good name, though.
Yeah, I did think it was pretty clever. It was owned by two of his sons, and he was spending more time at that store than he was doing mayoral duties. And after looking into this, it led to more and more questions. Now, we all know Home Depot. They were looking to open a new store in New Orleans. The company wanted to purchase streets so that they could build their store there. And the city appraised the land for $850,000. The city council was completely on board with this idea as long as Home Depot hired a certain percentage of employees from that neighborhood and paid them at higher than average wage. Okay? Home Depot wasn't super down with this, and Nagin actually contacted the CEO of Home Depot and told him he would assist him in getting his store built. But Nagin made it clear that the plan for Home Depot to build was going to happen, but but without the negotiations of the city council. The Home Depot was going to be built in an extremely poor community in the city, and having those guidelines would have boosted the citizens' quality of life. But these were the citizens that Nagin was claiming to fight for. These are the people that he said, I'm going to improve where you live. I'm going to improve your quality of life. But he approved Home Depot being built without these guidelines that the city council put in place. And he even sold the land for below market value. He ended up selling the land for $100,000. Then, funny enough, Stone Age landed a deal with Home Depot to be the exclusive granite countertop installer for their stores. Nagin would then complain to Home Depot when he felt the business wasn't making enough money. And when he did complain, he would send it on an official letterhead from the mayor of New Orleans, using his status to sway the company.
What a stupid side business to be so involved in. They're like, yes, I'm very involved in rocks.
Yeah.
Do something more fun to steal money. All right, don't funnel it into a rock business. That's so boring.
That's true. Rock on. I mean, whatever. Stone Age did about $170,000 in business with Home Depot before they ended the contract due to poor performance and customer complaints. So Stone Age was not the only sketchy situation that was going on. These sketchy contracts were being overseen by Greg Meffert, the chief technology officer. Remember him? Here he comes back around.
I guess a computer is just a rock we taught to think. So maybe there's crossover between the technology officer and rocks.
That was poignant, Kashan. That a computer is a rock we taught to think.
At its basis form, we throw electricity through a rock.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And we taught it to think.
You're right.
Using numbers.
So Meffert and Nagin, they were thick as thieves, and even to the point where they lived next door to each other. And after Katrina, Nagin gave Meffert the ability to hand out technology contracts with no bidding. So he could just give a contract to whoever he wanted. So Meffert starts awarding contracts. One big contract that he awarded was for security cameras to his friend Mark St. Pierre. And this deal made St. Pierre millions of dollars. But behind closed doors, St. Pierre was paying Meffert hundreds and thousands of dollars for getting him the contracts with City Hall. And once this scandal broke, the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI became involved in the investigation. St. Pierre had been providing a credit card to Meffert to use, which he did often. He spent over $133,000 on that credit card. He used it on trips and luxurious purchases, etc. And Meffert and the other people in the government would conduct meetings at strip clubs, on a yacht owned by St. Pierre. And once the meeting was over, strippers would come on board and they would play poker and other nefarious activities. Well, in 2006, Meffert leaves the mayor's office and starts getting consulting fees from St. Pierre. He collected almost $650,000 in checks that St. Pierre wrote for him. And in total, St. Pierre, only the one guy, gave Meffert almost $900,000 in bribes. So it's November 2009. Meffert and St. Pierre are charged with conspiracy, bribery, and money laundering. The indictment had 63 counts in it. And it made people wonder, what was Ray Nagin's involvement? It was said that Nagin went on vacations, got cell phones, and lawn care that was all paid for by St. Pierre, but there was actually no proof. And when questioned about outside vendors paying for his vacations, Nagin insisted that he didn't know that the vendors were paying for the vacations, that the trips had just been set up by Meffert. I had no idea.
There we go. Throw him under the bus.
Yeah.
Throw your friend under the bus, you coward.
Yeah, no, literally. In 2010, Nagin's reign as mayor comes to an end. Remember that 80% approval rating he had? It plummeted to 24%.
Oh, so still higher than Brian Johnson.
Still, Brandon, you don't even know who your mayor is.
I told you, I don't know one thing he's done. It's been years.
Once Nagin is no longer mayor of New Orleans, he and his family pack up and they move to Texas. After arriving in Texas, he starts getting consulting fees from the same company that he awarded contracts to as mayor. While Nagin thinks his past in New Orleans is behind him, Meffert is telling the feds everything that went on in his office. And it was noted that when Nagin went from making $400,000 a year at the cable company to $130,000 a year as mayor, his family never changed their lifestyle. So he had to supplement that income some way. And remember Stone Age? In 2008, Nagin asked for $60,000 from a man named Rodney Williams, who was trying to get city projects for his business. Nagin promised Williams that he would take care of him at City Hall if he gave them money. And Nagin was good on his promise. Nagin gave Williams so many contracts that he made up to $1 million per year. Another contractor that Nagin took money from was a man named Frank Fradella. Fradella wanted to purchase, so I had never heard of this before. It was called a smokestack power plant. Mm-hmm. Okay, I didn't know what it was. But it was abandoned, and he wanted to buy it, and he wanted to make it into a mixed-use development. And in order to buy the land, Nagin negotiated that Fradella give him $100,000, and he funneled that money through the Stone Age company to do so. Now, these weren't the only men that were doing shady deals with Nagin. There was another man named Aaron Bennett that Nagin would award contracts to for a bite of the beignet instead of the slice of the pie. A bite of the beignet. You see what I did there?
Is someone French? What?
New Orleans is French.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. And it was noted that there were tons of checks for $12,500. They would just write these $12,500, and there was just deposit with no real reason.
Which is over 10,000 though, so I don't know.
Yeah, which was weird because they did have to report that to the IRS.
Yeah, usually people would try to get it right under 10,000.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that, but.
And speaking of the IRS, it was found that Nagin had falsified multiple years of tax returns while serving as mayor. And in January of 2013, Nagin was charged with 21 counts of corruption. Greg Meffert, Rodney Williams, and Frank Fradella all testified against him. And Nagin pled innocence. He did. He said he didn't do any of these things, that he was being framed, he didn't know what he was doing. I do think that a big reason why Ray Nagin fell into so much of this crime was in the bribe, accepting the bribes and all that stuff. I think that a lot of it had to do with Greg Meffert. I don't think that, personally don't believe that Ray Nagin went into politics to become rich. I think he
was already rich.
He was already rich. He didn't need to go into politics to make money, to steal, to bribe, to, lie about his taxes. He didn't need to do that. I think he got in there. This is my pure opinion. I think he got in there. Greg Meffert was doing it. I think that he lacked enough of a moral compass to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I think he was like, all right, if you're doing it, I'm going to do it.
I mean, he probably got told everyone does this, right? Everyone in politics does this. It's just part of the game.
Yeah. And then he was, and then, when he got the extra money, he was like, cool. I got the extra money. I think he knew what he was doing. I don't think that he was fooled. I think that he made bad choices and he had to pay for those. Although he maintained his innocence, on February 12th, 2014, Ray Nagin was found guilty of 20 out of 21 counts, becoming the first mayor of New Orleans to be convicted on federal corruption charges. Because of his cooperation in testifying against Nagin, Greg Meffert received a reduced sentence of 2.5 years in prison. Rodney Williams and Frank Fradella got 1-year sentences, and Mark St. Pierre got his 17-year sentence reduced to 5 years after cooperating. Ray Nagin was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Like I said, he maintained his innocence the entire time. He claimed that people were after him and were smearing his name. His lawyer claims that the chocolate speech was the reason for the smear campaign. I don't think that's true. I think that it was his own choices that led him there. And on top of the 10-year prison sentence, he was also ordered to pay restitution of over $500,000. Did any of those people get their money back? Probably not. Because of the 2020 pandemic, Nagin was released early and put on house arrest. This was because of concerns with COVID, and prisoners who had nonviolent crimes were put on house arrest. He was then put on community confinement for 2 years, which is basically like a halfway house kind of situation. And he was on supervised probation starting in 2022. His supervised probation ended on March 16th, 2024. And when he was released, he quoted the great Martin Luther King Jr. by saying, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
Fucking eye roll, man. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think that's taking that out of context just a bit. Just a bit. Well, the floodgates opened and the money came rushing in, leaving Ray Nagin hungry for more. Nagin was plagued by his own greed, taking every opportunity to make a shady business deal and line the pockets of his friend while his city struggled to rebuild. Nagin had no intentions of helping the citizens of New Orleans. Instead, he used his power and influence to become as rich as he possibly could. Nagin is one of the few people that we have covered on this podcast who has served the time that they were given. I don't think he learned his lesson, but I'm glad in this case, justice was served. I was surprised he served his whole sentence when I was doing the research.
Yeah, it's kind of scary how surprising that is. But I mean, he served his whole sentence, but he served how much of that?
About half of it
at home, and then on, so like not really.
Yeah.
Like he did, but he also really didn't.
Well, yeah, he did, but he didn't. Yeah, no. But I'm surprised that once it hit 2020 that he just didn't get released, that he just still had to, show up. And, although he deserved it, I do think that race could have played a part in why he served his entire sentence, because he was a black man. If he had been, because then you're looking at Greg Meffert and Frank Fradella and all the other people who were involved with him who got much less sentences than he did. They were all white and they had less than half of the sentence years that he did, and he served his entire sentence, and he was a black man. So I do think that probably played a role in it as well.
Yeah, well, it also kind of sucks because that's what happens when you get caught last. Mm-hmm. And when you get caught last and then you don't admit to it, you're also going to get slapped like that. Because everyone else, they immediately said, all right, I did it and I'll give up other people, and they're always going to get off easier too.
Yeah, that's true. That's 100% true. But he did deserve it. He served his time in a sense, and I feel as though justice was served, at least in this one. And if you liked listening to this episode and you want more where that came from, you can follow us on social media. We are on Facebook.com/WhiteCollarsRedHands. We are on X at WhiteCollarsPod. We're on Instagram at WhiteCollars_RedHands. We are on TikTok at, you guessed it, WhiteCollarsRedHands. We also have a YouTube, White Collars Red Hands. If you want another way to support us for free, you could always tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to get podcast info out there, or just to convince your friends to do anything. Tie them down, force feed them, nasty stuff to get them to listen. I don't care. Just get them to listen to the podcast,
Like the scene in The Grinch where they're feeding them a bunch of pudding.
Yeah.
If that's how you recommend podcasts to your friends, then sure.
Let's do it. Another way that you can support us is by leaving a rating. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. We love a 5-star review, but we will take an honest one as well.
Not that 5-star reviews aren't honest.
No, yeah. I'm just saying, if you have constructive criticism, we'll take it.
They don't, Nina. Don't ask for it. They don't have constructive criticism.
Right. You know what? Just give us 5 stars.
Thank you.
I'll flash you.
No, you don't have to do that. You could have stopped.
I can't stop. Won't stop. Okay. Another free. No, I don't think that's free. Another way you can support us is by buying our merch. You can click on the merch tab and it will take you over to Haberdashery or Datchery.
Dashery.
Haberdashery.
What?
Haberdashery.
Why did you say that?
Because I forgot the name and I
It's
knew.
just Datchery.
Okay, well, I couldn't remember. So I knew it was like a play off of that. And I was like, I think I can't remember. Anyway, go there. And we've got our merch on there.
The link is in the show description and on our website.
Yeah, buy a shirt. Buy a shirt. All right, anything else I'm missing? Oh, if you hear of a white collar crime and you're like, oh, Nina and Kashan should totally cover that, send it our way. You can DM us on our socials, or you can email us at whitecollarsredhands@gmail.com. We've tried to do a fan submitted episode every single season, and this season I think we did 2. So
yeah,
very cool, very fun.
Yeah. Oh, and one last thing. If you are listening on Spotify and you'd like to listen without ads, you can subscribe to the podcast for $1 a month. You get to listen completely ad free.
Yeah. Excuse me. Don't let anything interrupt my voice.
We don't control the ads that we put on here. So if they play something stupid in between, I'm sorry. And if you want to get rid of it, $1 a month,
$1,
please.
Pay it up. Pay it up. All right. I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on another episode of White Collars, Red Hands.